morning, good afternoon, good evening, no matter where you are. It's good afternoon to our guest today. She's calling in from Madrid. She's part of our member IE Business School. She's actually the executive president of executive education at IE Business Schools. It's Teresa Martin Retortillo. And we're honored to have you here today, Teresa. I'd like to just give a quick bio so people know about your background. It's very impressive, of some really extraordinary activity that you've done in your career, and also some really great companies that you worked with. Outside of IE Business School, she previously worked on digital transformation for McGraw-Hill Education. She in her career has worked at Bain & Company for 20 years, and she's worked really largely with C-level executives through that, of driving company transformations and increasing shareholder value. So you've got a long history of working with executives, the kinds of people who should be coming to IE Business School. You also previously had started work at another company that we've all heard of, at Goldman Sachs, as a corporate finance analyst in London. So you've had an amazing career, and I'm sure you're having some real fun at IE as well. You're leading innovation in open programs, both online and face-to-face, including with the work that you're doing with the business school. So thank you for sharing more about the school today. And I know our members and beyond are very interested to hear more about, how they can progress their career through the executive education and the programs you have there, both in Madrid, in the US, and around the world. Thank you again.
My pleasure, Doug. It's a delight to be with all of your members today. And the way we were thinking of guiding the discussion is I might start with a brief presentation, and as I think you normally do in these webinars, feel free to send questions. Might take them as I present, but otherwise we will have plenty of time at the end of the presentation to cover them. So if you're ready, I can share my screen and let people see some of the content that I was hoping to share with all of you. Are you fine with that, Doug?
We're ready, absolutely.
Super.
I encourage everyone, as you have questions, go to the Q&A box there and ask them. And we also have, if you want to email them into info@globalchamber.org, we can receive them there as well, info@globalchamber.org. Thank you. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Doug. So the topic of our discussion today is to share some of the insights of the research we conduct on the idea of how to manage a career for a 100-year life. And this has very much been at the core of building the vision for IE executive education. And I think they are very interesting insights, hopefully, for many of you listening in today. What I was hoping to cover is the following set of topics, right? And I'll start with the first one, the gift of a longer life. And many of you may be wondering, well, yeah, this idea of living a 100-year life, maybe for others, clearly not something that that will affect me. And certainly when we hear about average life expectancy somewhere in the neighborhood of the 75, 80, and in certain countries like in Spain or Japan reaching 84, feels like 100 years is sort of very far in an abstract concept. But hopefully I can prove to you that it's not so abstract and that it actually may be very relevant for some of you already. Longevity is a new reality. And the truth of the matter is that life expectancy has been growing for the last 150 years. First, because of, and what we see in this graph is sort of the time series of average life expectancy and how as we grow, the life expectancy grows as much as actually evolving from somewhere around, sort of the 80s in the year 2000 to something that is going to look like more the 90s in the year 2040. Many reasons for that, but essentially, the declining early birth, or the declining rate of mortality in the early stages of life has been a key driving factor, over a century ago. And, lately it is more about the late life mortality and how we are learning how to handle those diseases more effectively, together with other medical and non-medical issues. So life has been growing, but actually, let me share with you just a personal statistics. And I like to, I'm sure many of you, when you look at those macro data points, figure like, well, that's not necessarily relevant for me. Well, some demographers based in Berkeley have actually, put together a model to predict as best as they can. And demographers are really not in the business of predicting, but they do build pretty compelling models. Of really estimating, what's the real, what's the life expectancy that someone born, for example, in 87 would have more than 50% chances of getting to. And so this is the data, for someone who's actually born in 87, they have more than 50% chances of living to 101. For someone born in 77, the data is, 50% chances of getting to 98. So I really don't have a good sense of what the age distribution of the audience is at this point, but certainly, you can do some quick math. If you're born in 67, the 50% possibilities is actually at the point of 95 years old. So the truth is that we probably have a life ahead of us that is possibly longer than what we had initially planned, and possibly longer than what our, the model that we've been brought up and raised is actually structured to do. And so, in my particular case, if I may just share my age, according to this model, I will, I have more than 50% chances of actually living past the 95, 96, which actually means that I probably have another half-life, a full half-life, which is pretty impressive. And again, for some of you, it may be a full half-life, or maybe, 2/3 of the life to come. In that context, it feels like, sort of thinking about the three-stage life that we have grown up to enjoy, and you see it at the bottom, right? Education, career, and then retirement. I like to call it wisdom because the word of retirement has some negative connotations. Feels like too simple a way of chunking that long a life. And so what we're seeing is the emergence of new stages. Some of them that have to do with the experimentation before starting full on a career path. Others that we call the impact phase, which is after 25 or 30 years of working, really recognizing the desire to do something different, possibly more transcendent, possibly with greater impact around you and in your communities, but certainly with a strong desire of staying active. And what matters at that stage is it's really what you leave behind, as opposed to how much you earn or what title you have, or different stages are opening up. Now, how does one think about this longer life in a way that is fully enjoyable? And at IE, I will admit, we do have a number of researchers around happiness. We do have a Center for Wellbeing and Happiness. But we do also leverage the research of other great institutions. So let me just pause for a second, and before talking about the career, let me just share a piece of insight that I think is extremely enlightening for this longer life, and that's the research done by Harvard University, the Harvard Medical School, in its study of adult development, where they actually found out that on a study that was done, actually the longest longitudinal study done on sort of what drives happiness and what drives satisfaction with life. Over those 75 years, the researchers monitored on a group of 700 people a number of variables that had to do with physical variables, social, how their social state evolved, like whether they're married, divorced, and so on, their careers, what positions do they have, were they being promoted, their actually socioeconomic status, how much were they leaving, were they earning, and so on and so forth. And every 2 years, they refresh the data and they gather information around the satisfaction with their current life, the level of happiness. And in doing that study, there were 3 key conclusions. The first one is that social relationships are good for your health. And the people who were actually in social connections were able to stay physically healthier longer. Secondly, the quality of those relationships matter a lot and made a difference. Thus, the importance that as one ages, loneliness can be really fatal in many ways. And so making a point of nurturing certain important relationships can make the difference between, at the end of a long life, how satisfying has this life been. And finally, it was actually proven that those good, high quality relationships had positive effects on the functioning of your brain. And as you may or may not know, brain diseases and mental diseases are a major cause of mortality these days. And so to the extent that, again, one can keep those relationships alive and kicking and nurture them, it actually seems that you have greater probabilities of living a satisfying life for longer. So just make sure you invest on those relationships and don't leave them aside as you think and plan for your career. So that's a word of wisdom that I thought was relevant before we talk about this longer life and what to do with a career. The second part is that I'm going to talk about different career models, but there's a headline that's important and that actually shapes the decisions about career all along, and especially as we think about longer careers. So sorry to say, yes, relationships matter, so does money. And so financing longer careers is increasingly important. Let me start with some macro data. What this graph shows is the pyramid, or what we used to call the demographic pyramid, at 3 points in time. So 1950, 2017, and 2050. And we can see this pyramid in a number of developed countries and a number of developing countries. The general trend is actually, the theme is the same one. We're going from something that sort of looked like a pyramid to something that looks more like a tunnel. Okay, and that is true, for the US, that is true, let's take it the other extreme, let's look at India on the right bottom hand corner, moving from a pyramid to something that's looking more like a tunnel. And the challenge of this is that a smaller number of working people have to actually fund the pensions for an increasingly large percent of the population, which can be as large as 20-25% in a decade time in some of our developed economies. So that does pose up a challenge for financing those later years in life. And with the same spirit and the same approach that I used before, let me take the macro data to the more personal data. And here I'm leveraging the research of 2 professors, Linda Grattan and Andrew Scott, on their book, 100-Year Life, essentially trying to portray, what the economics for a Jimmy are like. This Jimmy was born in 71 and is expected to die in 2056. So Jimmy, who will work for 44 years. If Jimmy, during those 44 years, manages to save 17% every year on its personal salary to fund its pension plan, it can then count on half of the salary it had before retirement for 20 years. And that salary will be funded, a portion of it by the Social Security, and that's a small part, and a large part of it by the pension plan and whatever pension arrangements he may have made. It is obvious that, this is just an illustration of a random Jimmy. There's many variables that can change this picture. And certainly the picture also changes by country, depending on what type of social security system do they have, what type of funding, of pension funding do they have. But sort of the broader guidelines are as follows. If you can imagine living with 50% of your salary for 20 years, assuming you accept that, then you need to think about getting there and starting to save, if you're not already doing so, approximately between 15 and 20% of your annual salary. If you're not, and if you're not doing this for 44 years, chances are you might actually be in a difficult situation once official retirement, once you reach official retirement. So the second big message here is please start thinking about your savings. Please start thinking about the beauty of compounding, of the power of compounding. And, needless to say, the more of a financial safety or the financial cushion you have, the wider the choices you can have in this longer career. And again, this message is very much really for people who still have quite some ways to go till retirement, so that they can think about, that retirement does involve probably another 20 or maybe 30 years after that date. And total unproductive mode could be quite a challenge for some of us. So that's the second message. The third message is that as we understand and as we study careers, career models, what we are saying is that transitions are the new normal. Let me tell you why, and let me share the implications. The why, we are, for most of the knowledge workers, we are seeing careers evolving from a Model T to a Model M. And what that means is that we used to have essentially an area of expertise on which we used to build entire careers. Those 44 years of careers could actually be built on a single area of focus that of course would evolve, but still one area of focus. Because careers are more likely to be 55 or 65 years than the 40, 45, there is more time to build new legs of expertise on which to build a career. But not only is there more time, there is also greater need. Obviously, the pace of change in any discipline that is represented on this call today. I now work in the world of education after having spent quite some time in the corporate world. Even the world of education is changing so fast that the need to not only update in terms of content and methodologies is there, but real expertise is needed on frankly new topics that are emerging, not by the day, but frankly, again, for example, if I were to think about online learning, a big thrust for us, certainly a journey where we've been at it for 20 years, but the pace of change that we see now demands real depth on learning data analytics, on new technologies like VR and so on. So anyway, I'm bringing my the example home because it's the space that I know best. But I'm sure you can all imagine in your own careers how the Model M can be evolving. And that doesn't necessarily mean within the same sector, okay? So there is permission to change sectors. And let me tell you how this is actually shaping out. So I was talking about transitions, the new normal. In this animated slide, I want to show how this may play out for you. So you've sort of for you or your kids or your colleagues. But you finish formal education. There is some time for exploration. There's a portfolio of different jobs that one can have, as an employee, as a manager, as an executive. Possibly some periods of self-employment. Possibly some time of employee again, manager, and of course the possibility of a portfolio career where people makes paid and unpaid work, and one does sort of frankly is employed or collaborating with a number of institutions or projects at the same time. And throughout this project, throughout this career, there are a number of transitions. So transitions, the new normal. Number one, those will come, so don't be afraid of them. You have to be prepared to go through a transition. Make sure you make the most of it. And third, use those times to think about, is this the right time to continue deepening in one of those legs of the M? Or is this the time to actually start building a new leg of the M? And that's why, I like the sentence of lifelong learning to lifelong earning, because throughout this career, it is highly encouraged that you never stop your own learning and your own growth, because chances are that you and your colleagues and possibly your kids will be changing jobs more frequently. Let me remind you that the average tenure on a given job is only 4 years. Companies may or may not invest in the learning you need to continue to grow. So very important to actually be the your own driver of your learning plan and of your improving your own capabilities. So this is another way of looking at the new career model, right? It used to be a trunk with some branches, but always the same solid trunk in the same place. And now it is more about catching the waves and sort of the raising with the wave and falling with it is part of it's part of the new career model. And falling from the wave is not necessarily a bad thing. It's actually part of part of what a career will entitle. And part of it is also seeing the new wave and being in the lookout for the new wave, because as you all know, of course, I'm not talking about lifelong jobs, but even jobs in the same company for 10 years are hard, are more and more rare. So some data on sort of what this new career model is entitling. Some companies that are already experimenting with project-based career. Some companies that are actually exploring the flexible career models where it's not anymore about a linear trajectory. You can come in and out, you can move sideways. So clearly this is happening, this is here to stay, and it's better to be prepared for it. How does one prepare for it? Well, in many of the executive education courses that we run here at IE Business School, we make a point of making sure that people leave not only with the knowledge, but also with a set of career management skills. Because in the career models that I described, they are absolutely critical to frankly craft the right career for you. And so it is about, taking control of your own career, continuously be exploring what are the options for the next 3 years, and be active at thinking and shaping those options. Build skills and become a centaur. We talked about hybrid talent, half a horse, half a man, or half a have a woman. And what I mean by that is, you know, frankly, you can call it Model M, you can call it Model N, but increasingly you need some understanding of, say, for example, technology, or some, and then again, within technology, it's too broad a word, but data, and how to read data, and how to extract insights from data, and how to that, and layer that on top of, you know, whatever it is you do, whether you're an engineer or a business person or an academic. So having two set of very strong pillars to your skill set makes a difference. Build your brand. The good news about social media is that you can make ourselves known and visible on things that we care about and we know about. And equally important, build your network. Oftentimes we think, and the research shows, that the network that takes you to one position may not be the same network that takes you to the next chapter. So the importance of actually controlling, again, and laying out the options for the next 3 years, so be strategic about your career, is important, because you can then start to shape and define the network that will be relevant for that. So, you know, again, a graphic picture of why centers matter. And we think about centers in the context of, for us, you know, we very much insist around data as being the next language that we all need to learn. Many of you who are listening to this are native English speakers, but for the rest of the world, English became a door opener 20 years ago, and of course has become an absolutely requirement these days. Our hypothesis is that data is now still a door opener. It will be a requirement very shortly. So, you know, wanted to insist on that fact. So lifelong learning, how does one embark on that project? How does one, you know, sort of bring this to bear as you are 30, maybe 40, maybe 50? What should you be doing differently? So let me just maybe give you a few hints for that. In this model, as I said, lifelong learning is important. And part of why this is important is because we've seen also an evolution of what are the critical elements for success.
You'll need to close that other window there that you've got, Teresa. Are you there?
I'm here. I don't know how it wide open. Let me see, just 1 second.
Somehow another second.
That's so cute. Can you hear me okay?
I can now, yep.
Okay, I still have another window here.
Yeah, that's weird. Let's see.
And I didn't touch anything. Let me give me a second. I'm sorry.
I was able to mute it, so I think we're okay.
Okay, super. So let me go back to this. Okay, so one of our hypotheses is that the critical elements of a successful career are evolving. It used to be, you know, raw intelligence as measured by IQ. We all jump on the, you know, Daniel Goleman and emotional intelligence boat, and now we understand that empathy and working with other matters. And we would posit that now it's about AQ. It's about the adaptive quotient. It's about the ability to adapt to the new circumstances, to the new technologies, to the new political environments, and really be able to read them and actually translate that into what does that mean for my responsibilities and my own opportunities. So if AQ matters, how does one develop that AQ? You know, in our mind, it's a function of three things. One is the learning mindset. So you've got to acknowledge that learning is important. You know, that being curious, that asking questions matters, and that within that learning mindset, you have to also believe that you're capable of learning. And we all are, by the way, regardless of our age. So the first component of the adaptive quotient is the learning mindset. Am I curious? Do I feel I can still learn things that, you know, may not be all that natural to me now? The second concept is, you know, as you might expect, the concept of learning agility, or, frankly, the importance of developing cognitive abilities. So it does matter, your ability to look for new information, collect feedback, process new information at a decent speed. Anyway, so, the basic ability to learn and, what we used to call, sort of use your brain, okay? So that matters, and exercising that continues to matter. And guess what? The more you use it, the better you become. The less you use it, you actually forget it. And so there's actually quite interesting body of research now that, we're all into aging and what prevents aging. And, it used to be an apple a day keeps the doctor away. I would say a book a week keeps, Alzheimer away. So, and there's a body of compelling research that, frankly, reading and staying intellectually active can do a lot of, can actually have great benefits, not only for managing your career and improving your adaptive quotient, but also for your physical growth. And lastly, there's some emotional traits that matter, and essentially I would summarize it in the ability to deal with the discomfort of learning, the ability to deal possibly with failure, and come back again, because that is part of adapting. So those are the key components of the adaptive quotient. In terms of learning, some of the things we share with many of our executives when they come to our classes is, and many of them feel a little awkward because they haven't been, back in school for a while. So how does one do this thing of, studying and learning again? And so I like this acronym of AGES, because it starts with attention. So bad news, multitasking is not good. You do need attention, and it's hard to actually, for all of us who are becoming very short-term focus and multitaskers, it's hard to spend, the 20, 30 minutes or even 1 hour focused on one topic, but it is an absolutely necessary condition. The generation deals with the idea of when you learn something, it's important that you actually apply it and use it in your everyday job. And so the more relevant the learnings to things that you can use, the better it will stay. Emotion, we all learn better if we are having fun and we are actually connecting with others. And so making sure that this is a pleasant experience. Oftentimes emotion can be also interchanged by motivation. So making sure that we're clear about why we're doing it really truly enhances our ability to learn things. And spacing, our brain learns by building networks of neurons, and those connections of neurons become stronger the more you let them sit and go back to it and reconnect. So spacing is important. Another concept that is actually fundamental, and we work a lot on it as well at Executive Education, is that we can be very good at delivering knowledge. But for some of you who have already been some time in the workforce, knowledge is only one component. It is equally important to actually think about the motivation and the mindset that unlocks action for impact. And I often say, I have the privilege of sitting at a number of boards, and I often say it's not the knowledge that makes a difference. It is the ability of people to actually put forward their arguments and have the courage to defend them when sometimes the room or the tide is against it. And some oftentimes, especially in business settings, that can make the difference between a successful career and a not so successful career. So really addressing the mindset issues and really working on that part is important. I am finishing now with just a few brief comments about how has this shaped the vision of IE Business School Executive Education in how we think about our place in the world, and very importantly, supporting many people like yourselves and your organizations. So, we start by asking ourselves a very simple question, sort of, why do we exist? What for? What's our role? And we've actually come to a simple answer, which is we're here to help both individuals and companies grow. And growth is, at the time where every single international organism is actually reducing growth prospects for every country around the world, this is actually not a given. It's a pretty challenging topic, but that's a challenge we have undertaken, growth. And I can talk about, many of the economics and many of the challenges behind growth, but I really like how Lars Sørensen puts it. He is the CEO of Novo Nordisk and has been appointed #1 CEO by the HBR 2 years in a row. And he talks about it in the following way: growth and innovation matter most. Finance is just a metric, not a goal. Digital tech is a primary enabler. And by the way, business transformation never ends. So talking about adaptive and adaptation, that's part of what businesses are about. That's part of who, we as individuals need to be about. And some of our favorite growth programs, let me just spend a second on a couple of them. We have a very powerful global advanced management program. It is a program that is run, 2 weeks, then some online work, and then 2 weeks. And it is about, the claim of this program is about disrupt, but be disrupted. So folks who have been working for, a good 10 years, who have been, at level of excellence on a number of functions and are really in need of getting a sort of holistic vision of the company and get ready to step up to the next role of responsibility. That's a perfect program for them. And we actually took a stand there and thought that, yes, we will teach strategy, but we will actually focus not necessarily on the, 5 forces that we used to teach 20 years ago, and more about what are the models that can be disruptive and how do you think about embedding them either in a larger organization or think about using them for new ventures. So that's one of my favorite programs. Another great favorite of mine is the Global Senior Management Program. This is a 2-week project, one that we run together with Chicago Booth. And it's 1 week in Chicago in May and another week in September. And this one puts the focus on leadership and strategy. So after, a good 15 years, maybe more, at a career, at a given role, how do we help you all sort of, get reacquainted with the best leadership style for, whomever we are, but also in connection with strategy and thinking more broadly and more strategically about the challenges ahead for our own organization. So that's the second one. And then I like to also mention briefly 2 one-week programs. One is in June in Madrid and Segovia. Segovia is where we have one of our campuses. It's a 12th century monastery. And this is a place where we have many of our, Fab Lab and Technology Lab and Media Labs. So the contrast is amazing. And this is also where we run this great program, Unlocking Exponential Growth. It is about, it is for many of you who want to sort of become familiar with the digital transformation and what this can do for your business. And so it familiarizes, with the new business models, sort of how do you go at building them and building the communities? What are the data and infrastructure requirements? What are the change leadership requirements? Frankly, a phenomenal program, and with, very, very impressive executives hungry for change. And then the Executive Summer School is a short 1-week program that we have at a very convenient time in Madrid in the month of July, where there's a lot of things, great things happening in the city. And it's frankly sort of an opportunity to catch up on new trends and sort of refresh maybe some of the concepts that you haven't seen in a decade, and might actually be very helpful in boosting your performance and giving you sort of new perspectives from other industries. So on that note, let me close here and take some questions.
Thank you very, very much. I really want to say, Teresa, that was maybe the best presentation I've seen in a long time at Global Chamber, in terms of not just the overall quality, but the focus in on our members in the sense of how they should be thinking about their career. I'm enlightened, and I really appreciate you sharing that information and contextualizing the education component relative to the dynamics in the marketplace. Thank you very much. That was really extraordinary.
My pleasure, Doug.
Those of you that have questions, send them into Q&A, or I've got a couple at info@globalchamber.org. You can also send them there. So the first question relates to the ideas that you shared around the 100-year life. How does that differ country to country, or maybe region to region? And then how would you contrast the requirements or maybe the implications of that for a senior manager versus a middle manager versus a professional? How does that change people's perspective based on the topics that you covered? Yeah,
that's a broad question, and we could spend the remaining 20 minutes on that. But let me give you some initial reactions. How does this differ region by region? Well, let me just maybe, the life expectancy to begin with is different region by region. And so unfortunately in many economies, we're still seeing life expectancy in the order of the 60 pluses. And so I do not pretend to say that for those countries, they will actually get to 100 years. So I am mostly talking about developed countries, although to be fair, when I travel the world, and I happen to spend quite a bit of time in South America, Africa, Middle East, some in Asia as well, the growth in the life expectancy is also true for them. And so the need to, and what is also true for them is that life expectancy and the implications for work are actually going faster than the changes in the sort of social structures are. And what I mean by social structures is, how long you spend, in college, in school, and then in college. How long are you expected to work? When are you expected to retire? So to just give you very simple examples, life expectancy, as you have seen, has been growing for the last century and a half, at a tenure of approximately 3 years per decade. And yet, some of our retirement age has not been updated. The retirement age dates, for many countries in the world, dates a good 60 years, when the life expectancy was 65. At that time, retiring at 65 or made sense. Now, retiring at 65 when the average life expectancy, for example, in Spain is 84, doesn't make any sense. It's 20 years of retirement with people who are really healthy. So the point is, most of the themes are true across developed and undeveloped and less developed, across the Americas, the Europes, and the implications are actually different. Again, to maybe make the comparison, and I love, for example, the Dutch government. In Holland, you can actually go to the Social Security webpage, you put in your age, and they will tell you when are you estimated to retire, and they're actually adjusting this annually. So this is a very forward-looking country. In the case of Spain, for example, we still have it at 67, and in the US, it will really depend on which corporations you work with, and so on and so forth. So there are clearly important differences by region. The second question around how is this different what are the implications different for a senior than for for someone more junior. So the implications, the first 2 points that I made in my presentation are true for both. I mean, for frankly, regardless of your age, please do nurture those relationships. They make a difference. They make a difference in many ways. And frankly, the financing part obviously is a bit more of a challenge when you have fewer years to work before retirement. Having said that, sort of, if you're more on the younger side of things, the encouragement to save and the encouragement to mentally think about a career that is not necessarily 40 or 44, but that is more likely to be, 60, can help you make better decisions. Obviously, if you're 50 or if you're 55, well, there's, less degrees of freedom there. But the point that I would make for those people who are already sort of on the 50 or 60 age bracket is that at that age, you can possibly, again, even if you take the publicized average life expectancy, which, by the way, I don't know if you know the definition, but that is the life of a baby born today. And so if in the US, we're talking about average life expectancy, I think it's around 75, 78. I'm giving you a range, and I should have checked it before jumping on this call, but so apologies for that. But let me say it's 78. So on 78, if the average life expectancy for the US is 78, that is for a baby born today. If you've made it to 50 or to 60, by definition, you have greater chances of passing 78. And if that's the case, sort of think about just for a second what that means in terms of years alive, and just think for a second how many of those years do you want to be active? And active, and by the way, / productive. And active does not necessarily mean working 8 or 10 or 12 hours a day. There's certainly an array of possibilities. But don't let society and don't let people tell what you should do because of your age, because clearly less degrees of freedom for saving, but clearly lots of degrees of freedom still for finding and crafting the other leg of your M, and what are the things that interest you. And again, one shouldn't plan necessarily for the next 3 years. What if you were to think about the next 10 years, and what could you do in those 10 years? Well, maybe if you think about it, 10 years more of work, maybe starting up to learn new things could be justified. Anyway, so some ideas there on how the implications might be different for younger versus more senior people.
Thank you very much. Another question we have is, could you explain more about maybe the programs offered by the business school more holistically? Whether you're in the Americas or in Asia or in Europe, you showed several programs that look like they're in Spain next summer. What other things are available between now and then and beyond, both online and in person within their region, that IE Business School offers?
Okay, so let me give you a sense for this. This is, I wasn't going to show the catalog of the 90 programs that we have within executive education. We think about our programs in terms of pathways. And so we have a general management of strategy pathways, and there's a whole series of catalog, and I would very much invite you to check our website at ieexecutiveeducation.com. And if you want, I can send sort of the link and the name of a contact person. So we think about pathways. So there is a general management pathway, there is a leadership pathway, there is a data and digital pathway, there is one on finance, one on social and purpose. There's another one in sales and marketing, family businesses, and transforming sectors. So there are all those sort of an array of programs by sector. Now, many of them are face-to-face, and when we do face-to-face, we have only one campus. And it's, I mean, 1.5, I guess, because Segovia is very, very close to Madrid. It's in Spain. And what we find is that most people enjoy taking the time off to get to a new environment and really, dive into a learning environment that's very far from what they're used to, doing. We do have a number of online programs that are actually start regularly, and that are also part of that web page and part of those programs. And our online programs, we call them high impact online programs, because we tend to, again, thinking about knowledge plus mindset and really teaching something practical. So we actually make them interactive. You get a chance to discuss both with the class and the professor. And it's, a pretty unique experience. And overall, the themes there are very much what I talked about, very strong focus on helping you grow as an individual, and also, translate whatever it is you learn on the program back into your organization so that it can grow as well.
So the adaptive element sounds like it's a key part of the programs, presuming resilience is part of that concept as well, but
absolutely,
definitely
absolutely.
The concept of one job for your 40-year career seems to be over based on what you're saying.
Absolutely. I mean, I think it's really truly the exception these days.
So the random Jimmy, then it sounds like you get a lot of random Jimmies that are very specific around coming in and looking to build the tool chest and maybe for their next opportunity. And I think that's another key takeaway that you've shared with us today, right? Is it sounds like we all need to be thinking about what's next, and not just getting training for what we're involved today, but recognize that, you're going to be doing something different in the future, more than likely.
I'd like to think, Doug, it's interesting because I like to think about this in terms of, thinking about what's next, like in the abstract is a hard exercise. But if you think about the next 2 to 3 years, it's a lot easier. And there's a simple exercise of, sort of in your current role, how are you adding value and making a difference the next year? If you feel there's not a lot of answers to that question, then the next question should be, well, where could I add value and have an impact in my existing organization, even if it's not in my existing role? And really be, in the lookout for what else could I be doing where I could actually be relevant. And of course I would enjoy. And the third one is, if the answer to those first 2 questions is not very convincing to you, you ought to be asking yourself, where else could you actually add value and have impact outside of your current organization? And which organization might this be? And again, it may not be a decision for tomorrow, but as you think about 2 or 3 years ahead, it's a very healthy exercise.
Okay, that makes sense. From a company standpoint, how are leading companies viewing these kinds of things? Because a lot of the potential here is they maybe even support someone's education, and that person will be drifting away at some point and going somewhere else. Someone like Lars at Novo Nordisk, how does he think of executive training for his executives? I presume very positively, but how do these kind of key leaders that are head and shoulders above others thinking about executive education and encouraging their employees to take advantage of these?
Well, thank you, Doug, for that question. We see we see a set of behaviors that are, on the one hand, Lars might actually be very focused on delivering executive training on the things that have a very direct ROI on his business. So you need to know about my product. You need to know about how you deploy, sort of a sales team. You need to know about things that are very, very direct to the business at hand. What many of those corporations don't necessarily cover well is what Jimmy and Jane and Peter and Vanessa need for their growth. And so what we're seeing more and more is that many of those large and medium companies, frankly, actually have a budget for individuals to develop their own personal either gaps or their own personal interests. because they believe that managing their career and actually having executives that are thoughtful about growing and investing in their growth is a positive thing anyways. And so they actually fund partially many of the programs, some of the programs that I just talked about, but many other programs. So maybe some of the listeners are working in companies where there is some annual funding, whether you get $5,000 or $10,000 and you get to use it or lose it. And it is really about satisfying that particular development need that you need at this point in time in your career. And so that's how most companies complement and think about executive training. So the vast majority of people who come to our open programs are individuals who are in senior positions but want to sort of cover a number of things that are not necessarily covered in the very focused, generally, sort of product focused or function focused type of training that they get at their corporations. And where most of the time, the diversity of sectors and diversity of people you learn with is actually a real asset to the whole experience and to bringing new ideas home.
Thank you. We have time for one more question, and before I ask it, I just want to make sure, you mentioned earlier about contacts, and so if you're like to get more information today, send an email to info@globalchamber.org and we'll make sure it gets to the right person. And then we have a blog post on this coming out on Monday, so we'll have additional information, including, I think, the entire video. This is one video that I personally will be watching a second time because I think it's been so educational. One last question. Whether it's the random Jimmy or Jane or whether it's a company, how should they be thinking about return on investment for spending money for one of these executive programs? How do they calculate that, and should they be thinking about it?
It's a great question, and we think about this in a number of dimensions. Number one, as I said, we think about growth in the company dimension and the personal dimension. Let me start with the personal dimension. So the return on investment for the personal growth comes because the individual has a set of very specific needs, and we actually have assessments that are actually designed to understand what their gaps are and what they need to be working on. And especially on the Global Advanced Management Program and the Global Senior Management Program, they both work, in both programs, they work closely with a coach to help address the specific needs that have been identified. And that makes them a better leader and a more effective leader. So that's the personal growth. The company growth, it really is about, and in many programs, we try to take the ideas that are exposed in class, get them to be worked on as groups, and then translate it into what do I do differently Monday night AM when I'm back home. And so depending on the program, obviously you do different things on, sort of a month-long program than on a week-long program, but you typically end up with a roadmap of what is it that you need to do differently back at work. And we actually follow through after the program is ended to understand and support some of those changes that were identified during the program. So at the end of the day, the ROI is, I'm taking time off, I'm investing possibly part of my money, but also oftentimes part of my company's money on this, and I'm going to get a boost in how I actually lead and generate results and I enjoy the job. And two, in actually identifying new opportunities that are very tangible and that I am working during the program at actually flushing out so that they are as ready as they can be for action when I'm back at work. Those are the two returns on the initial investment. And oftentimes we make a point of really tracking this and asking, we have a Net Promoter Score, and I'm very proud to see the results of those Net Promoter Scores and how people go way above and beyond to talk about their experiences and how that has help them achieve what they wanted to achieve. So far, so good.
Fantastic. We've come to the end of the hour. Is there anything else that you'd like to say, or kind of as a recap, or anything maybe that didn't come out that you'd like to articulate here to close the program?
The only thing that I would like to maybe add is at IE, we are a truly global school by definition. This is our DNA. We have over 160 countries represented on campus. Half of our faculty is international. And if you actually value the perspective of getting out from, the sort of more traditional, I suppose you're all US based, and into a leading business school, but also that brings the variety and diversity from different business contexts, we would welcome you at IE Business School. So I hope to see many of you soon.
Fantastic. We actually have watchers from Asia and Africa and Europe and Latin America and
oh wow
as well. So I think there's certainly a lot of interest, and there will be a lot of interest in what you've discussed today. Thank you so much for your time and the enlightening conversation. Really fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you, Doug. Thank you, everyone. It's been a pleasure joining Global Chamber today.
Our pleasure. Thanks. And everybody, in terms of next steps, maybe watch this video again when it comes back out on Monday and really get your brain around it. Send it to a friend. I've been listing people here that I want to send this to, that I know are thinking about this in their career, and it's certainly, I think, going to be very helpful for them. Our next programs include one that's about hot new opportunities around the world. So this is something that we do every quarter, where we have people in every corner of the world talk about what's happening there. This could be part of your M in terms of your career. You should be making connections, as we learned earlier, and you should be learning about other opportunities that maybe can help elongate your life and also help you financially along with your life. And then in addition to that, we have a number of different programs coming up in August around landing your business in other countries. So we have it both in English and in Spanish, 2 different days. And then we have a year-long program that we're starting August 28th. To learn more about that, come to our website, reach out to us, read a newsletter. And bottom line is, your career is a long one, as we learned today. Be engaged, connect with the global tribe of Global Chamber, and continue to be successful. And as we always say, be global and unstoppable. Thank you, everybody, for joining us, and thank you, Teresa.
Thank you. Love the unstoppable part.
Let's do it. Thank you very much. Have a great rest of your day.
Bye, you too.